All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining on time and despite the load shedding and everything else that's happening at the moment. We've had a very large number of last minute cancellations because of the load shedding hitting people's areas, especially in small towns, pretty badly, both scheduled and unscheduled blackouts. But we are going ahead since we had scheduled this so far in advance. Thanks for those that joined a bit early. You would have enjoyed Makwande Luande, and that was performed by Sibusilo Klaba, who's part of the Connections Carnival, one of the 6 winners of our Connections Carnival. He'll also be playing live for us as the outro to this session. If you stick it out till the end, look forward to that. There's so much stuff going on with small town regeneration in South Africa. It's quite incredible. I've been lucky enough to join EDP at the same time as this program got started in the start of March. And the last 6 months for me have been a whirlwind of learning. It's been quite interesting to visit different spaces. I was in Bredasdorp last week, presenting with the Small Business Institute on small town regeneration. And the outcome of that session was collaboration and partnering is the key, and achieving greater accountability within local government is the key. So that's why we're here today, really. And you know, if I were to just brief you a little bit on what we've been doing since our last session as a Full Towns Action Network. It's been, I think it'll probably take the 2 hours, so I'm not going to, but do have a look at the newsletter that was already sent out. That was our first newsletter that got to you 2 weeks ago. And there'll be another one coming in about 3 weeks' time. There are a bunch of resources there, including a collaboration with UKESA, which has a bunch of small town regeneration resources that we're uploading as EDP and support partners. There's an interactive map. And there's also more information about the Connections Carnival winners, which will be rounding up with the Valley Changemaker Network in Genadendal and Greyton in the Western Cape, hosting a Changemaker Festival at the end of November. And we'd love to have more than just the 6 towns that are already part of that joining. And so closer to the time, we'll be sending out more information and communications about that. But to get this session going, I'm going to hand over to the EDP CEO, Andrew, who's going to give us a little bit of a background to why we're here and how we are here for new participants, and the recent focus in on accountability. Andrew?
Thanks, Simon, and good afternoon, everyone. Really great that you could join us this afternoon. Let me start off by saying that towns matter. It's not just the big cities, but small and medium-sized towns matter for all sorts of reasons. They matter because of regional economies. They matter because of agricultural production. They matter because of their connections to in some cases, hundreds of surrounding villages. They support the tourism economy. They support the transport and logistics systems in our country. So towns matter. But we know towns have been taking strain in South Africa for all sorts of reasons. Mines have closed. There's been droughts in some areas. There's been floods in other areas. There's been social issues to deal with. There's been municipal performance issues to deal with. There's been infrastructure issues, particularly with connecting roads in some parts of the country, which haven't been maintained. So for all sorts of reasons, towns have been taking strain. And we've got 600 small towns in this country. What a network. But we've got to support that town system in our economy and in our society. So what we do know is that change makers in many towns have been working to turn around the fortunes of their towns. They've come from business, they've come from communities, they've come from NGOs, and change makers from within the public sector. So our job is to support people making change on the ground in each and every town that we can find. so what is our approach through this Towns Action Network? In responding a few years ago to the drought in Cape Town and the Western Cape, the day zero, and more recently to the food crisis under COVID, we use the 3 C's: to connect, to communicate, and to collaborate. And that's basically, in very simple terms, the approach that we're adopting here. The first one of the 3 C's, to connect, means you're not alone. You're not doing your work in your town or in your community on your own. You're part of a bigger system, and we're here to share lessons and support each other, and learn from what different towns are doing. Secondly, we're here to communicate. We're here to tell stories. We're here to put towns on center stage. We're here to communicate what is happening. Sometimes it's a difficult story when things are not going right in towns, which we have to face up to. But often there are good stories where people have taken action, joined hands, and turned around the fortunes of their town, or even just the high street, or the CBD, or some small wins, some filling of potholes, and that's progress. And then thirdly, we're here to collaborate, to support each other, as I said, and particularly to try and join three types of groups together. One is the change makers or practitioners, people working in communities, or working in municipalities, or working in business in the high street. That's one grouping of people. Secondly, it's the policy makers who are there to try and support and enable the environment for small towns to flourish, like the small town regeneration strategy of national government. And thirdly, it's the researchers, the people looking at these things in terms of data, in terms of trends, in terms of analysis. And we think that by bringing these 3 groups together, the researchers, the policymakers, and the change makers, we add value to each other. Otherwise, we tend to go off into our separate silos and do things on our own. So for those of you who are new to the EDP, we're a collaborative intermediary organization, a public benefit organization, and more often than not, we are here to provide an independent platform to join the different sectors together: public, private, community, civil society, academic, and research. And we do that in many different sectors, as we're doing in the Towns Action Network. But we are not alone. We have 8 partner support organizations that is part of this network that we regularly meet with, strategize with, and they help us find what is happening on the ground in different parts of the country. So while we may be based in Cape Town, this network is supported by people working in different parts of the country, and not just at the EDP. And Simon, then just to conclude the introduction with the theme for today, as you said, what's come out pretty much standard or common to most processes that we've engaged with in small towns is this theme of accountability. How do you hold people who are responsible for delivery of certain things, including basic services, accountable for their performance? It's quite hard for community volunteers or business initiatives on their own to turn around the fortunes of a town without cooperation of the public authority. And if that public authority is not accountable, or only accountable upwards to politicians or to auditor generals, it's not helpful. So the theme today, it's a very exciting theme, is how do we join hands and take action on accountability, building accountability, downwards accountability into our processes as we look at what's happening in our towns. So Simon, over to you to introduce the first speaker.
Thanks, Andrew. So thanks. There already seem to be some discussion points popping up there in the chat. Please do use the chat. We're going to have a back-to-back session today. There's a lot of information that we're going to be exploring and sharing. And we'd prefer, if you're wanting to sort of raise anything new or any points that you want to add, please do raise it immediately in the chat. Don't wait for an opportunity to speak. We will try and give people an opportunity to speak, but please share it in the meantime. Before I hand over to the first speaker, I would like if everyone can just put on their cameras. What we're going to do is a bit of a mass selfie shot. So try and put on your cameras and we'll take a few screenshots. We'd want to see everyone that's around us, this big countrywide table today. Whoop. Yeah, thank you. Cameras, not mics. And we'll just take me and the team, we'll take a couple of shots of that. Thank you. Looking great. I see some of you have definitely put on that makeup. Done your hair quite nicely. Thanks, everyone. I love the smiles as well. Please do continue smiling. There we go. We'll share those afterwards as well. Okay, so you're welcome to keep on your cameras as you feel like it. So first speaker that we have is Kevin Allen. He runs an organization called Municipal IQ. It's got quite a long history of tracking trends in municipal governance and looking at exactly what is going on and why. So I'll hand over to Kevin straight away. And I think if you want to start sharing your screen, just hope that all works out. And what he's going to be looking at is, are there positive trends as well? Great. Kevin, you can go for it. Thanks.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. And Simon and everybody else, thank you for inviting me. It's very exciting to be here and to be part of this and to be adding a little bit of information to such an important organization. I, like many other people in the country, am very concerned about small towns, specifically in the context of the municipalities that govern them, and by and large, how these municipalities have deteriorated and the impact this has had on the majority, I would say, of our small towns in the country. So that's one of the key reasons I'm here, to try and assist an organization like this to try and add some lobbying and get some information going and understand what's happening there and understand how to assist people to take part and to hold their municipality accountable. Simon, just confirm you can see my presentation. Okay, great. All right. So just for clarity's sake, Municipal IQ in a nutshell, we are an organization that specializes in the collection and analysis of local government data to assess municipal performance. The data we use, aside from media-based service delivery protest data, is nationally collected policy norm standard data, for example, from National Treasury, from AGSA, from StatsSA, and many other sources. The way we assess performance is through a range of different indices and monitors, which we've built over 15 years. We are independent, data-driven subscription organization with public and private sector clients. Okay, so we're not politically aligned. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is just some insight from our side of things. The first thing is on trends in small town municipal governance. Are there any positive trends, and if so, why? Can these factors be scaled across other municipalities? Secondly, just discussing out-migration of small town populations and reasons for it. And then thirdly, action for accountability, lessons from what's happened in municipalities. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to share with you is just a take on governance through our compliance and governance index. So we have this compliance and governance index. It measures compliance through looking at a municipality's ability to submit an IDP on time, a water services development plan on time, a HIV/AIDS policy on time. And then looking at financial management in terms of audit outcomes and other more focused financial issues, such as delivering a budget on time, what the budget looks like, the difference between actual and proposed expenditure, ability to roll out projects such as in terms of expenditure on conditional grants, and then capacity constraints, what the level of vacancy rates are, how effective leadership culture and oversight are. Now, on each of those, I won't go into them in detail because I don't have a lot of time, but on each of those, what we're able to do is quantify these in terms of a specific score. We add all these up, we weight them in categories, and we come out with a total score per municipality. And what it measures, again, is compliance and governance in a municipality. We've been using this for very many years. We built it about 13 years ago. And yeah, we like it. We think it's a pretty accurate reflection of compliance and governance in municipalities. So I just wanted to share with you some of the results. If I could firstly break them down by different categories. So you could say to me, okay, but Kevin, we're just looking at small towns, so don't waste our time on the other categories. But I just want to do it by category first because it provides some context and also some benchmarking, which in data you learn is very critical. So the first thing is, in terms of the way the scores for the first category, which is category A's, in other words, our 8 metros. And if you have a look at the bar chart on the top, you'll see category A's do much better than everybody else. And of course, this is not a surprise. It reflects their size, their resources, and their capacity. So you would expect them to do well on the Compliance and Governance Index. There's a bit of a twist here, which I'm going to share with you in a second, which is probably going to surprise you. The second and third, category C's, C1s and C2s, our districts with and without water and sanitation authority. The C1s are below average. The national average is the last bar on the right. They do pretty poorly. And the C2s, they're above average, better than C1s, which is intriguing because the C1s you would expect to have more capacity because they have more money and they deal with water and sanitation. Be that as it may, then we get into the Bs. The B1s are 30 large urban municipalities. These are the best performing Bs, or the best performing category, apart from A's. And this reflects good capacity and resources. And again, the B1s, they're quite big. This is what we would expect. The B2s, there's 124 of those, and they're defined as having 1 or more small towns, but no ex-homelands. These are on average, these are below average across the category, and they're the second worst performer. And then B3s, which there's 28 of those, and they have 1 or more small towns and ex-homelands. They're above average, and they outperform Cs and most Bs. And we can ask why this is. And then B4s, there's 23 B4s. They're rural municipalities with traditional authorities, but no towns. They're below average. They're the worst performer. And we know this is because they have low capacity and low resources. Okay, so that's just a bit of a sort of context around the CGI and how everybody performs across all categories. So I wanted to also share with you, sorry, I'm just moving my menu down a bit. The top 10 on the CGI across all categories. Now this is really interesting. And what you'll see is the top performing municipalities on our compliance and governance indicator, including all category A, so all metros. So these are the big metros like Cape Town, which is well run, and Joburg and Ekurhuleni and all of these, and eThekwini, which have lots and lots of resources and money and lots of staff. So in other words, they should have good capacity rankings. But Midvaal comes first on our CGI, which is, and Midvaal, as you might know, is a B2. So it's a category B municipality, and it's a subcategory 2. And Swartland, Overstrand, and Saldanha, they come second, third, and fourth. So that's really intriguing. So B2s on average don't do that well, but across the board, comparing municipalities one-on-one, the B2s take the first 4 spots, okay? And then the B1s are also reasonably good, 6, 7, and 8, Steve Schwete, Bateau, and Neisner. they all perform really well as well, okay? The city of Cape Town, which is our top performing metro on the CGI, it only comes 9th. In this entire list, it only comes 9th. So when you take away things like resources around budget, ability to spend money, etc., when you peel all those layers away and you just look at ability to comply and indicators of governance, you find that small municipalities can do really exceptionally well. The importance of this, so what we can conclude, I don't want to go off on a tangent here because I've only got 10 minutes, but let me just say B2s and B1s do well nationally, okay? Now, just to look at another aspect of this as well, okay. If we look at just the top 4, so we've looked at the top 4 we've looked at the B1s, and we know in terms of the national ranking, that the B2s do really well. So if we look at B2s, B3s, and B4s, just those 3 categories, which we would agree is the sort of small towns included in category Bs. Although, you know, these definitions are not absolute, but let's just take it as a working definition of small towns. Let's say that would be B2s, B3s, and B4s, just for the purposes of this discussion at least. And we can see the top 4 B2s all come first if you refer to the middle column, so the ranking. And then next up, the B3s, the best performing B3s, they rank 23rd, 26th, 32nd, and 35th. Still pretty high if you're looking at the fact that there's 257 municipalities in the entire country. And then the B4s, you would expect those as well. So remember what I said initially, B2s perform pretty poorly on average, and B4s perform pretty dismally because we know they have poor resources and poor capacity generally. But if you look at the top performers, you can see the top performing B2s and B3s do really well, and the top performing B4s also do well. They come 19th, 33rd, 41st, and 50th. And the conclusion we would reach here is that when we compare national ranking, the top B3s score significantly less well than B2s. And so it's the converse of what I said earlier. And across the board, you can see in individual cases, the B2s, B3s, and B4s actually do well as well, okay? So when we look between the averages, we get a slightly different picture. And what can we conclude from category B performance on the CGI? So performance between the B subcategories varies greatly. The B1s and B3s on average perform better than B2s and B4s, but some B2s are the best performers on the CGI nationally, and some B1s also do well. Why is this? It's because local municipalities within subcategories vary greatly and are difficult to compare in absolute terms. So we can't make generalizations about category Bs, looking beyond the B1s, in other words, B2s, B3s, and B4s. So the important thing here, and this is a really important point from my side, is that not every local municipality and not every small town is doing really badly, although you might get that impression, and in our weaker moments, we might think to ourselves, we might wonder if that is the case, but it really isn't. Some small municipalities are doing really well. And if you look at the ones that I illustrated earlier, you know, they're doing the best in the country. So that's important. And what we can also say is that the CGI helps us to identify best case and worst cases, and we can emulate the best and learn from the worst, okay? That's really the bottom line, and that's really what's important here, is to say that we can actually identify some really good, well-performing small town municipalities, and we can try and look at what they're doing and see if we can't emulate that in our other municipality, in our other small town municipalities. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, those that are doing really badly on compliance and governance, as on our index, we can also identify those and say, okay, how can we help these guys? And what are they doing that's different to other municipalities that's really dragging them down. Sometimes those things are very obvious. You know, council doesn't sit, they don't submit any documents, IDPs, budgets, anything else. Their audit is a disaster, etc. So sometimes the help they need is very obvious, but not always. And lastly, in the question or the statement I give to you is that we can also assess whether public pressure or government intervention are possible in the worst, okay? So when we know who the worst is and when we can look at this, we can then decide both as provincial, regional, national government, if you will, but also as communities, whether we need to assert pressure to change in these municipalities we can identify. I'm going to move on quickly to municipal performance and population shrinkage. At Municipal IQ, we have a population growth monitor that shows a clear link between poor performance or failure in a municipality and a contracting municipal population. This makes sense because nobody wants to live in a failing municipality. The trends from this monitor are really worrying. The population of almost every municipality in the Free State except Mangaung is contracting. Also, almost all of the Eastern Cape except Nelson Mandela Bay, and it's similar in much of northwestern KZN. Now, you will know if you observe local government or monitor it across the country, even at an arm's length, that the provinces I've quoted here are problematic provinces in many different aspects, but certainly the municipalities of the Free State and the Eastern Cape, and for that matter, the Northwest, we've known them to be problematic for many years. So when I tell you that the population of their municipalities is shrinking, it shouldn't come as a surprise, but this is evidence of that. What happens? People who move, they go to metros and well-run locals. So while urbanization is a global trend, so it is to be expected that urban areas will grow. I mean, it happens across the world. In South Africa right now, the movement of people is spurred on, if not driven, largely by very poor performance or failure in municipalities. For me, colleagues, this is alarming. It really is. It's evidence of the impact of failure in municipalities beyond our metro and highly urbanized areas. It has to be arrested. We have to do something. If we don't, we could well see an acceleration of the collapse of municipalities beyond urban areas, and it will act to destabilize the entire country. As Andrew was saying initially, the impact of things is felt way beyond where an event happens. So you'll find where people move, it's not only that you see the draining of people and capacity and resources from rural areas, it also means a huge influx of people into urban areas and destabilizing those areas. So we need stability across all municipalities in order to perform and function as a balanced whole. Understanding those fleeing, failing municipalities, this is just an important point of clarity. So there's three groups that we would identify. Poor people worried about their survival and ability to work. They move for better access to services and jobs. They represent a significant quantum of people, and they move to metros and larger Bs, which adds pressure to these municipalities. The important thing is that poor people who move, it's a large group of people. It means the influx into other larger municipalities and metros. This has been happening over at least the last 10 years in very clear ways, but certainly also probably for the last 15, 18 years. But it is accelerating, and we need to worry about what it's, not only what it's doing to the smaller municipalities, but what it's doing to larger ones. We also have rich, highly mobile individuals who can move easily. They move to well-run Bs. It's a very small number of people. They add income, investment, and jobs to places they move to. Obviously, these are the people you don't want to lose. They're the people you want to attract. And there's many clear cases which we can identify of such individuals who move and the loss that it is to the municipalities they move from. And then thirdly, large and small businesses move because services are unpredictable or have collapsed in the municipalities they're moving from. And this is a huge loss of rates and jobs for municipalities. This also acts to accelerate population movement, and deterioration in municipalities. So that's very dangerous. And anyone who lives in a small town will be aware of this threat if you haven't already personally experienced it. My third section, action for accountability. So we recently saw amendments to the Public Audit Act in 2019, the New Systems Amendment Act, which bars politicians from holding admin positions, a New Structures Amendment Act, which sets out minimum council requirements, and a specialized code of conduct. We believe at Municipal IQ that these will definitely add teeth to help not only government, national and provincial government, to hold municipalities accountable, but certainly, and why not, lobby groups and communities to hold municipalities more accountable. So it's also something to strengthen communities and people on the ground to act in more decisive, specific ways to put their leaders under pressure. I must say, lobbying to have a municipality placed under Section 139 administration won't necessarily improve things. This is because we've had very mixed results from Section 139 interventions, and the conclusion we would draw at Municipal IQ, we monitor Section 139s, and we have an index of every 139 intervention in the country. And from what we would conclude is that the majority don't work and they don't bring about any positive change. And then legal cases, you know, a lot of communities and community organizations and alliances have brought legal action against the municipalities. These are tricky, they're expensive and time consuming, and both the municipality and the province is likely to oppose any legal action. They take it as a direct threat to them, and so it means you're going to be stuck in court, spending a lot of money on something. And what we've seen in Mekana is that the municipality and the province may also just ignore any court order. I mean, you can have a situation where you have a court order where a municipality is supposed to act on something, and then you go back to court to try and enforce the court order. So it's a complicated course of events going to court, and it's not always, you don't always get the outcome you pay the money for or you think you'll get. So what do you do to get your municipality to do better? Lobbying can be very effective, only if the lobbying group is representative of all stakeholders, possibly through an alliance of organizations. It needs to be it needs representativity and strength of numbers. You can't have a sectoral lobby group, suburban ratepayers who represent a small portion of the population. Even though they may be articulate, they may have lots of intellectual resources and money, you need to build a broad alliance. You have to have your facts and figures correct and understand the way your municipality works. You can't just complain, you'll be easily dismissed. And this means understanding the budget, the IDP, and it means observing council meetings. So all these things are interlinked. Basically, you've got to be as strong as possible to bring as much pressure to bear as possible, and you've got to be aware of the municipality looking at how they can dismiss you as a small lobby group, as a group of racists, etc., etc. Okay. You also need to know where to apply pressure. We would advise you need to meet with your councillor or mayor, or attempt to meet with them. You need to do, there is in legislation allowance for writing petitions, letters to council. Those things should be attempted first. And then, you know, you can, at any of those stages, or certainly afterwards, if things don't if you don't get a positive resolution of your issues, you can go to the press releases, you can send a letter to the MEC, to the provincial premier, you know, but what those points make clear is that you have a specific strategy and plan of action, applying pressure in the right ways, not just discussing things in a bar or in a community hall and shouting at each other. There is often a lot of that goes on. And then lastly, just a point of warning, really, protests are a double-edged sword. Protests are very effective. They always attract attention. Once something goes to the media, everyone, including the municipality, the provincial government, and usually the national government, is sitting up and taking note. But they are increasingly more violent. Municipal IQ, as the premier monitor of service delivery process in the country, we look at these things very, very closely. They are becoming more and more violent and more destructive every time one occurs. We are increasingly seeing loss of life and injuries, so we need to be very wary of that. More generally, in the first instance, pragmatism is key, and an adversarial stance with confrontation and possibly conflict is to be avoided if possible. If possible, you should aspire to partner with your municipality to improve governance, financial management, and delivery through lending specialized skills such as accounting or engineering, through lending capacity such as farmers, tractors, grader, to grade sand, gravel roads in very small towns. This has been very effective. And then participation and input in public processes. If this doesn't work, then of course the other options are always on the table and they can be used, but it's easier, quicker, and cheaper if you have a pragmatic approach and if this approach does work. I'm going to stop there, Simon.
If you could stop sharing the screen as well, thank you. Amazing insight there. I think one of the interesting things I heard certainly was how not everyone is flocking to the metros when their own municipality is failing. Many people are moving to smaller municipalities that are well functioning in terms of municipal services. And I think what came up in Bredasdorp just last week and before in Oudtshoorn at a Salga Small Town Regeneration Conference is the difference between a Zoom town, which then often becomes a boom town, versus a doom town is often simply municipal services and the governance that mean whether those function or not. I also enjoyed how you ended with the partnering aspect, again, bringing that theme forward. I'm going to ask, I mean, building on the action and action for accountability theme, I'm going to ask Sekwetlane Pamodi from the Accountability Lab South Africa to present next on what is available for citizens, for residents, for partnerships, and for municipalities to build around national policy. So they'll be presenting on the National Anti-Corruption Strategy with a bit of a focus on active citizenry and accountability. And then after that, Andrew will take us through a bit of a discussion based on what both speakers have presented. If you have any questions of clarity in the meantime, if you want to just post those into the chat, any comments on Kevin's talk, if you want to post those into the chat, and then Kevin, if you wouldn't mind having a look at that to see if you can respond to anything in real time. So for now, let me hand over to Sekwetlane. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Simon, so much for this opportunity to present some of the work that we're doing through the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council as it is today. But just before we get to what that is and what it does, let's maybe have a little bit of a chat about what the strategy is, how we developed it, and the focus on pillar one, which is on active citizenry, which is really where we are now. May I have some screen sharing rights in the meantime, while I also just drop in my contact, my email address, so that anyone who has any questions or follow-ups can then maybe contact me through that. I'm afraid I have a hard stop at 3:30 today, so I'm going to be whizzing through the presentation and then maybe just following up with some feedback afterwards as I have another engagement. But perhaps let's maybe start where it starts. What is an As I've introduced myself, I'm Sigwadlani Pamudi. I work with the Accountability Lab in South Africa. We're a translocal network. That's another way of saying that we're a family or a network of organizations called the Accountability Labs that operate in, we're now up 13 territories across the country with 12 network labs operating from Nepal across to Mexico, with our biggest footprint being in Africa. I am wearing dual hats today. I'm also representing the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. Some of you may know or may have read that the president recently appointed another council body to advise him and his office around organizing the work around South Africa's whole of society strategy to responding to corruption at the first instance, but also advising him in the coordination of the work around implementing the recommendations of the State Capture Commission, as it's called. I'm one of the members of that council. We were appointed in September, and really I'm also here to represent some of our work, because the strategy is in fact a core component. In fact, it's the core mandate of our work over the next 3 years. So what is the National Anti-Corruption Strategy? Let's maybe talk a little bit about the development process. So some of us may recall that in the period between, in around 2015, 2016, the then President Jacob Zuma announced the formation of a national anti-corruption task force. That was an interministerial task force that would then start coordinating the work around turning the corner around the entrenched corruption of maladministration in South Africa's public sector, but that had also caused or was resulting in a lack of confidence between people themselves in their engagement with the public sector, in the engagement between the public sector and the private sector, and most certainly between citizens and residents with the private sector themselves. We were really in a position where declining trust in the public sector, because of the corruption we're seeing in the public sector, was translating itself into declining trust in society itself, and the decline of the social fabric as a whole. In the 2014 to 2019 midterm strategic framework report that was published, a key recommendation was the setting up of this task force, this interministerial task force. And that task force developed a diagnostic report about what would be required in order to respond to corrupted maladministration we're experiencing across our society, and most certainly in the public sector itself. That then set the stage for the discussion document that was released in May 2017 that really recommended the development of this whole of society response to corruption. It couldn't be government alone. It couldn't be the private sector by itself. It certainly couldn't be citizens and residents by ourselves, because we had seen that without effective coordination between the role players in each of those sectors, if we'll call them that, or social partners, which is really the language that we use, we were not going very far around turning the corner on corruption. And so it was that there was around 2019, towards the tail end of 2018, but certainly in 2019, there was the formation of this body called the National Anti-Corruption Strategy Reference Group. And this reference group combined all of the social partners. We had people from civil society really commanding the space, and also co-chairing the body, the public sector itself, and of course the organized labor and other representatives from society engaged in this open platform to define what a national anti-corruption strategy ought to look like, what the key outcomes ought to be, and how it was that we needed to get there. The key outputs there, after a national consultative process with workshops, with so many meetings, with expert consultation, produced a draft strategy document and a draft implementation plan. that was concluded towards at the end of 2019. Through 2020, the reference group then worked together in terms of doing the quality assurance of some of the principles and proposals that had been made, doing some of the content refinement and alignment of priorities, and then establish this multi-sectoral reference group, of course, and then lastly then produce a draft monitoring and evaluation framework, as well as the strategy document, which was ultimately adopted at the end of 2020 by Cabinet. So what do we have in place? We've got the strategy document, the NAC strategy. I'll be sure to share the strategy document and this presentation. In fact, I'll share you the full stack presentation of about 60 pages or 60 slides with you. It's an open presentation. It's good for people to know what we're doing, what our mandate is, and how we even got here in the first place, so that you can be able to engage with it. We heartily invite engagement and also, proposals around how you can be able to contribute to the action plan, as it were, based on the strategic framework as we have it in the part A of the document, which is the strategy document. We then have an implementation plan. The implementation plan, you'll see, has been converted to various tables, so that we can then be able to have like a guiding light in terms of what are the key actions that we are needing to implement. And again, those key actions are not just, pie in the sky proposals. Various social partners have owned some of the key actions, but are still requiring partnerships with others in order to be able to mobilize them. Of course, among those social partners are Accountability Lab, with who have presence, where one of our programs have presence in under Pillar 1, which is really around the Integrity Icon campaign, which is really trying to promote active citizenship and promote a values reorientation around our relationship with the public sector, and most specifically public servants themselves, so that as opposed to only focusing on what is wrong with our public servants and in the public service, we can also really identify centers of excellence, values, norms, and behaviors which are exemplary of the public servants and public service that we want and deserve in society, so that as society we can start then building, rallying around them, lifting them up, and promoting these values, norms, and behaviors as the expected norm that we are willing to rally behind, support, and fight for. Part C of the strategy then is the monitoring, evaluation, and reporting framework. I regrettably don't have a copy of this. It sits on my desk in my home office, and I reference it quite frequently, at least twice a week, around the work that we're doing with the Accountability Lab, but also on the NACAC, as it's called. This is the Advisory Council. What is the vision? One, we want to have South Africa that has ethical, transparent, and accountable state, business and civil society sectors, in which those in positions of power and authority act with integrity. We want citizens who respect the rule of law and who are empowered to hold those in power to account, zero tolerance for corruption in any sphere of activity, and of course, substantially reduced levels of corruption. We've got 6 strategic pillars. The key one there for our purposes today is the promotion and encouragement of active citizenry, whistleblowing, integrity, and transparency in all spheres of society. This is just a map of the social partners and how they relate with one another and some of the key actors, high level. The key implementation programs under Pillar 1 are the support of active citizenry and values reorientation, protection and support for whistleblowers, improving integrity management and encouraging a commitment to ethical behavior, increasing and strengthening transparency in all sectors. And I think there are, for all of those of us who are participating today, there are various places in which some of our work directly or indirectly responds to some of these programs and proposals and outcomes that we are trying to engineer here through this strategic framework. And we hope that you might be able to also contribute to these. And again, I really invite engagement and for you to contact me to interact about how that might look, because the NACAC itself is definitely looking to finding key strategic partners who might be able to assist us and support the work ahead. There's a point on promoting and encouraging active citizenry. These are anticipated impact. I won't go too much into that. There's a whole slide there on the outcomes for that. We also want to, and then this is an indication of some of the outputs that we want to be producing. So launching the strategy in a multi-sectoral event, we're working towards having a big launch conference. A national communication plan with key messages around SBC communication and campaigns. Programs developed to promote enhanced understanding of citizens' rights and government processes. And I think that this is key for this particular network because all of our work is really about how do we empower residents of small towns to be able to understand how to leverage the processes that are in place in spite of the challenges we are faced with in order to be able to turn the corner around some of the biggest challenges of small towns and some mid-sized and perhaps even cities in the country. We want to have an annual anti-corruption summit, and we're also certainly looking for building a community of or working with strategic partners who are themselves communities of interest and knowledge networks like the TAN itself to be able to support the work that we are doing, and so that we can also be complementing each other in the work that we're doing. Look, there's so much to share. I've already gone on for 10 minutes where I was given 7. I will be sharing the slide presentation with you and the strategy itself. But I think that there are a lot of opportunities for us to be able to kind of connect the work that we're doing through the TAN, where we are respectively and with respect to our respective organizations and as well as individual actors in terms of coordinating our work collectively towards a common goal, which is really strengthening our society starting from the ground up rather than this top-down structure where, you know, it's yet another body, yet another committee that doesn't take us very far. So I'll close it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sekwetlana. Thanks, and sorry to rush you. Yeah, I think what's wonderful is that citizen focus. There's also a lot of pressure on citizens to carry out NACS, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, and it would be good to perhaps hone in. Perhaps we could have a sort of feature in the newsletter of how it can be made useful to citizens. Later on in this program, we're going to have Diana Shigaz, who will be presenting on social norms and the role of social norms, adaptation, and recognition of the importance of that in reducing corruption and enhancing accountability. I'm going to hand over to Andrew just to kind of summarize what we've heard so far, and before we move into the next slot, which will be a bit of a hands-on session. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon. I mean, we've heard 2 inputs, but I've also been monitoring the very vibrant chat discussions and just to pick up some things there. But I think the one thing I would just highlight is one of the first things that Sekwetlana said is that when you have declining trust in government and public institutions, it exacerbates the decline of trust within communities and the breaking up of social fabric. And I think so it's not just about the relationship between citizens and their government, it's also about the relationship between citizens and themselves. And we've certainly found that out in quite a few of our other projects where we were testing for the quality of the relationship between, say, the local authority and the community, but 90% of the conversation got into who's inside and who's outside this community, who belongs here and who shouldn't be here. And in many cases just paralyzes citizen action. It paralyzes entrepreneurs being able to set up new businesses. It paralyzes volunteers being able to do things. So I think that point that the Accountability Lab has raised is a very important one for us to look at. So this is not, accountability is not just how we hold public officials accountable, but also how we hold ourselves accountable. And I'd link that to one of Kevin's points when he was talking about sort of tactics and strategies and, you know, what are the alternatives to putting municipalities under administration. And I think a lot of chat was that's often a double-edged sword. It often doesn't work. And I agree with that. It's really hard to make that work for a whole lot of reasons. Not least that suddenly the people who are doing bad, when they be put out of office by the administrator and let's say by the provincial department of local government, suddenly become the victims and spend the next year playing that card. So I think Kevin's point about strength in numbers and building broad alliances and not just having narrow interest groups challenging some of these things at the municipal level or the town level is very important. Building cross-cutting, cross-sector, cross-town alliances, Boerdorp and Onderdorp, formal CBD and township CBD. These become very, very important alliances to build to have an impact. I think if one doesn't do that and responds in isolated ways, the impact is less. I think generally what's come out of this discussion is the connection between good governance and socio-economic and environmental performance. And clearly, there's so many cases where poor governance is a disaster for the local territory. So much so, and Kevin, your stats there on population shrinking is quite sobering. I think the other thing that Kevin you pointed to is that provincial government dysfunction plays quite a big role in local and municipal and town dysfunctionality, particularly in Free State, Eastern Cape, Northwest, and KwaZulu-Natal. And that's a whole nother level of accountability and turning it around. And Doreen and you and others were talking about the hollowing out of the Free State administration and how hard it has been to start turning that around. It's not easy. Once something has been broken, to turn it around is really painstaking work over a long period of time. So there's no easy fix, no easy solutions coming through. The final point I just make, Simon, is that, and Kevin, thank you for the input on municipal performance. It's a sort of more general question, and that's is there a connection between, well, there is a connection between municipal performance and the territorial performance. In other words, the economy and society within a territory versus the institution and how it performs. But I think also there's cases where you can have good governance and sound compliance and lots of boxes being ticked, and you still have poor socioeconomic outcomes for large sections of the population. And I think we've got to also look beyond municipal performance. That's absolutely important as the starting point, but also look at territorial performance and how people are participating in the economy. What are we doing about the environment? What are we doing about the just transition in towns where mines have to close? We're dealing with pollution from coal-fired or coal-based or fossil fuel-based industries. And we're having to go through a massive transition over the next 20 years from a decarbonization point of view. So these are some of the wider issues that we're going to have to grapple with as well. But Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. I want to invite Lungile Penka from the Public Service Accountability Monitor, or PSAM. He's been involved in starting up an initiative that actually shares the same name as this session. Interestingly, we came across the initiative Action for Accountability shortly after deciding to hone in on this as part of the TAN core theme. And it's a very exciting EU-funded or co-funded project with bases across South Africa, so three in Joburg and one project in Makanda. So today, Lungile will be speaking a little bit about Makanda. Lungile, maybe if you can just start by explaining a little bit about what you're doing and why.
Thanks, Simon. And afternoon, everyone. So basically what we're doing is we're doing a project that seeks to enhance our public participation. It seeks to enhance our accountability from duty bearers in the context of the four sides. We know in the country we have a crisis of accountability. We have a crisis of poor governance, especially in the local government space. So our project is a joint funded project. It involves 3 organizations, Public Service Accountability Monitor, Accountability Lab South Africa, and Ahmad Katrada. The project seeks to enhance public participation so that there is improved advocacy, especially a citizen-led advocacy, not just organization-led. We've been involved in organization-led advocacy. So we're also trying to capacitate citizens so that they're able to join hands with us in holding duty bearers accountable. So it's a citizen-led project. So the project came about through understanding the state of poor governance, especially in most municipalities, including the Makanda context. In the Makanda context specifically, there's poor governance, state of service delivery is also poor, and there's also lack of accountability or resistance to be accountable, especially from officials and also the politicians who are also political duty bearers. And there's also lack of consequence management or even implementation of consequence management systems if the municipality does have them, if they do exist, they're not being implemented. So through our project, we're trying to ensure that citizens are also capable of participating meaningfully, understanding the municipal system, understanding governance, so that they have another avenue of engaging government, of holding them accountable beside protesting. So that's basically what the project is about. Yes, we are engaging as separate organizations directly doing advocacy. We are also engaging collectively as organizations doing advocacy, but also ensuring that we are not leaving citizens behind in the advocacy process. So that's basically what we are also doing.
Lungile, and when we were chatting with yourself and your colleague Yunus Chamda from Ahmad Khatara Foundation, you guys are talking about this interesting concept of the quick actions that support accountability. I don't know if you want to just maybe explain a little bit more about that and what is happening and what's planned in Makanda.
Okay, so in the context of Makanda, we have a lot of the issues that are currently mentioned. And as I have said, as much as we are in this process of capacitating citizens, but also quick action is basically about us as organizations involved on the ground in Makanda, working collectively with active citizens to ensure that we do the advocacy process. Quick action is about doing advocacy, looking at current issues now and challenging the municipality, even in the context of Makanda, through advocacy, be able to hold them accountable, writing in the media to look at the current issues, be able to articulate what is currently happening in the media, driving the issues based on what is emerging from citizens directly. So for instance, recently we had the National Portfolio Committee of COCTA visiting the Makanda, visiting the municipality, and then the invited stakeholders were able to go and present our side of the story as the clients of the municipality. So quick actions in that case would be an opportunity for us to go and share our side of the story. The municipality was given a platform to explain and justify to the committee why do things look like the way they do, and we had an opportunity to do that ourselves as stakeholders. We invited active residents to be part of the process and also to be collectives. Now we're in the process of finalizing a joint submission. So quick actions about us as organizations involving active citizens engaging the duty bearers directly through advocacy efforts.
Interesting, thank you. I know there are a lot of other organizations working in Makanda to try and better the town, working towards regeneration and also working towards enhancing accountability. One of our support partners, Kagiso Trust, has the Circle of Unity or as a partner for that project. Are you working with any other organizations on the ground? How's the partnering looking like? Are you planning to work with any other towns?
We're working closely with currently the organizations that you've just mentioned now. We are open to working together with other organizations as long as they say they have the same mandate and the same agenda. Remember, in any town, we can have the same problems, local government problems or local governance problems, but then each organization have different interests. So as much as we are collaborating with a number of stakeholders locally that are interested in seeing changes taking place in the municipality, so we are working closely with them, we are able to contribute, and then each organization decides how they want to contribute. So we do work, we have joint efforts, and then we also work separately to achieve, but we also hold multi-stakeholder events in order for us to share and be able to understand how we can collaboratively work together. So we are open to expanding our stakeholders even locally and beyond, as long as we share the same sentiments, we share the same interest in terms of what we want to achieve or what we want to see happening for things to change in the context of Makhanda.
Great. So maybe if you can drop your own contact details into the chat and people can get hold of you, that would be great. We'll also be hearing from another EU-funded project in South Africa, also focusing on accountability in 12 pilot towns. So we'll be hearing about that later in this session. But yes, I'm excited to see over the next 2 or 3 years, it is, right, that you're running this project?
Yes, it's a 3-year project, yes. So we are still on phase 1 of the project now.
Great. So I think, I mean, to be honest, if we have suggestions from participants here, any ideas on how you would like to take the project forward, maybe if you want to share that with Lungile, and certainly look at the Twitter handle. Also, Lungile, if you have any more resources that you can share, I can find out more about the project so we can look at how we expand it to other towns, perhaps through the Towns Action Network. Next up, I'm going to invite Outer, the organization Undoing Tax Abuse, to take us through quite a hands-on session. If you scroll up to the chat, perhaps you've already downloaded the app. You might even have already downloaded before this session. It's called the Link app. And they're going to be taking us through how to use the app and giving us a bit of a hands-on tutorial on that. So I'm going to hand over to Norman de Villiers to do that. Thanks, Norman. Just to unmute. Thank you. There we go.
The mic was off. Sorry. Thanks, Simon. I appreciate it. I just want to give a little bit of background about the Link app before I start. So first of all, the Link app was first called Link Powered by Vodacom. It was an initiative to go out to municipalities and give them a solution that can offer them a way for residents to report service delivery requests directly into the municipality. And the problem with that was, at the time it was Link Powered by Vodacom, there was costs involved and the municipalities didn't want to come and take the solution. So eventually we became Link Powered by Outer, and you all know the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. So we took the solution over, and what we're doing with it now is we're giving the solution to municipalities for free at zero cost. There's a front-end app that allows users to report municipal issues directly into the municipality. Okay, and then we give the municipality a ERP backend where they can see these incidents and then they can manage the incidents. We've had great success. We've got about 3 municipalities that have already signed up. We've got 3 municipalities that are currently busy viewing SLAs, and we've got about 8 municipalities that we are currently waiting to do presentations for. So the solution has really taken off. We've integrated into the back end of the city of Cape Town. So if you report incident into the city of Cape Town, a job card gets created automatically, and the incident gets taken care of, and you get a message back on your app that the incident has been fixed. And it allows you, it shows you statuses. So it shows you if the incident is submitted, if the incident is in a resolved state or action state. And all this is then visible to the municipality. And then obviously for smaller municipalities, and this is where you guys come in, we give the solution with the back end to them. They can have the residents download the app. We help with the marketing. We help with the getting of the word out of the solution. And then they've got the solution for free, and we don't charge them a single cent for it. So we've looked at similar solutions, and an ERP system like we are offering for municipalities are upwards of 10 million rand to get such a solution going. So this is at zero cost. So without further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys a video about the solution, which is the Link app video. And this will give you a very quick overview of what the solution actually does. So I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And can you guys see that?
We're not able to see anything.
Can you see now?
Yep, there we go.
Right, so let me share the presentation with you. And here we go. There we go. And am I sharing with computer sound? I hope you guys will be able to hear the video. So I'm just stop sharing. I just want to make sure when I share screen, I'm sharing with computer sound. So this screen over here, share sound. Okay, there we go. And share. Right.
Norman, oh, there we go.
Okay, here comes the video.
Introducing the free Link app. This app gives South African residents an easy, effective way to communicate directly with their municipality about infrastructure problems or service issues within their community. From faulty traffic lights and potholes, to water leaks and sewage overflows. It's so quick and simple. The entire reporting process can be done in seconds or from a mobile phone. If a municipality is connected to the Link app, they will receive an immediate notification of every incident logged, along with its exact location. If more than one user reports the same incident, the app counts each additional report against the initial log. Once the municipality has attended to the issue, every user that reported it will receive a notification informing them that it has been resolved. Should a municipality not yet be connected to the Link app platform, they will still receive communication notifications of each incident reported from Link's administration process. Because the Link app is a citizen-driven platform, users are empowered and encouraged to keep reporting the incident if they see that it has not been resolved. Not only will regular citizen reporting boost the Link app intelligence, it will also encourage municipalities to use the information provided to them as opposed to ignoring it. From the data gathered via the Link app, useful dashboards and comparative reports are provided, which add real value to progressive municipalities and overseeing bodies. What's more, the Link app works across all municipalities throughout South Africa. The Link app also makes information available to other stakeholders with the intention of bringing citizens and their municipalities closer together, all in a bid to improve service delivery. The Link app enables active citizenry and for residents to become part of the solution in building smarter, more efficient municipalities. Available for download now from the App Store and Google Play.
Well, I believe that explains quite a bit of what the solution does, but I want to quickly just take you through an actual interactive report so that I can show you how the app works. So if I report a municipal issue, I can then go onto my Link app and you can see my screen, okay? So let's say, for example, I want to report a pothole and I click on pothole. Currently, I'm not at the location. So if I say select, let me just go, I think I'm in the wrong page here. I'm going to say submit. Okay, just a second. So let me go in. Okay, so let me just close all. Just go new. Okay. Okay, I've got a location. Okay, submit. Okay, reported. Okay, so I just want to. Okay. So once the incident has been reported, there's a back end. Let me quickly show you that. So this is eThekwini municipality. So if you have a look over here, this is the dashboard that we share with the municipality. So as you can see here, here's all 111 wards in eThekwini municipality. If I click on my incidents tab over here, then the incidents that have been reported from the municipality appear in the reports dashboard. Okay, from this view over here, the municipality can then go and assign these jobs to technicians within the municipality. So if I wanted to assign this specific task over here that Tim reported, I go over here and I go and I say edit, and I can just say test because it's a test incident. Okay. Select the date and time it's selected, it's lights out, it says the account number, assignee, I can assign it to myself. And once I've assigned the incident to myself or to a technician, then this person gets an email to say that he needs to go and fix this specific incident. So if I say save changes, you'll notice now that the incident has been assigned to Norman de Villiers. And then I can take it and I can put it in an actioning state. And the resident that reported this incident will automatically get a notification to say that the incident has been actioned. It will also give this resident a notification to say to him, for instance, let's go to an older incident like this one over here. So you'll also get a notification that will say, dear Norman de Villiers, we have reported this incident to eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality on your behalf. Your reference number is that, and this incident can take up to 2 working days to be fixed, whatever the case may be. And then he gets that notification on his app, and then obviously there's communication between the municipality and the resident. The other thing that we offer the municipality is a comprehensive dashboard. So I just want to quickly show you the dashboard that you can see how the dashboard looks that we give them. So we give them the reports dashboard, and on the reports dashboard, they can then see exactly what's happening in their municipality with regards to the incidents that have been reported, whether those incidents are in a submitted state, whether they're in an actioning state, whether they have been resolved, whatever the case may be. And this allows the municipality to then manage the incidents effectively. We also offer the municipality heat maps and stuff like that, so they can actually identify hotspots and view where these incidents have taken place. So if you go over here and you have a look at the municipality report, you can then see that the total incidents that have been reported, which is 2,801. You can then also have a look at incidents closed within the SLA. Currently, only 5.2% of incidents are closed in the SLA, but this over here is a RC environment. This is a test environment. This is not the live environment. So all our test cases are over here. And then what we also do is we can then, for instance, show you the following information. We can have a look at all the incidents in the municipality, and then we can have a look at the top incident types by status. So if I go to my septic tanks, for instance, over here, and I hover over my septic tanks, I can immediately see 15 are in a submitted state, 0 have been resubmitted, 314 are actioning, 495 are, for instance, auto-resolved. I've also got the ability to then have a look at incidents by month. I can have a look at what's happening over the last couple of months. I can then also then have a quick view and see how many incidents are in submitted state, how many are in an actioning state, how many are resolved, for instance. And then I've also got the ability to go and export all this data onto a CSV file. And then I can then disseminate the information from the portal the way I would like to disseminate the information and work with the information according to my needs. I want to show you guys one more thing on the reports dashboard. Yeah.
Great to do this, but we just make sure.
No problem.
Thank you so much for the very wonderful explanation, and also for that opportunity to see the back end. So for those municipal representatives that are involved, and I know Stephanie, who's just been in the chat, is from COGTA, and has lots of contact with smaller towns, I think it's a great opportunity to make it easier to track what's actually the issue in your towns. Norman, can you just, if you want to stop sharing the screen, then I can.
No problem. I can stop.
Thank you. So, I mean, this is a wonderful possibility of action for accountability, and you were mentioning there's already been some uptake in municipalities and a lot of interest, and we'll definitely be passing on that possibility to additional municipalities that we're part of, and to active citizens to be able to lobby their own municipalities. I think the research that has come out from Tufts and from other from the Corruption, Justice and Legitimacy Project, which Diane will be presenting on next, Diana, really just shows, however, that no matter what technical fixes are out there, no matter how good they are, it's not the only solution, and it won't actually be any kind of solution unless other aspects are in play. So I think Diana will speak a little bit more about that now. She'll be speaking about the Social Norms and Corruption, Justice and Legitimacy Project, and introducing to us this concept of social norms. So Diana, I'm going to also have to keep you to time. We'll have to finish off just after 3, probably about 4 minutes. Oh, sorry, probably 4 minutes past 4 our time. Diana, I know you're in the US, but you can do the conversion. Thank you.
I'll do the conversion, and I love the app. I wish my town had it, as my car is in the shop for damage from a pothole. Oh
my goodness. And that's Boston, I believe. So it's not only small towns in South Africa.
United States. So I'll say I'll be fairly quick and go through things, and happy to share slides and other resources with you. So I am co-director of the Corruption, Justice and Legitimacy Program, and our purpose is to improve anti-corruption programming. Because of a lot of the things that we've noticed that Lungile sort of mentioned, sort of the lack of accountability, the resistance to accountability, and the lack of implementation of consequence management systems. We've been working with accountability labs in Johannesburg in South Africa, but most of our work has been in Central Africa and Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, Somalia, Central African Republic, DRC. Working on analyzing and working with practitioners to test out new approaches to dealing with social norms and some of the non-technical approaches to dealing with corruption. And I'll just give a couple of very brief stories to start, just to give a sense of where the problem and some of the limitations of technical solutions. In our work with Uganda, we were working with the Public Service Commission. There's a law, the Anti-Corruption Law of 2009, which mandates that people who have been convicted of corruption and put into jail be removed from the payroll. And they've done standardized the forms, made digitized things, clarified processes, clarified responsibilities, put some oversight and accountability, and there's still a surprising number of people who are sitting in jail and still on the payroll. We've also worked with some municipalities, local governments, with an NGO project to increase accountability through citizen engagement with local government to improve service delivery. And responsiveness to citizens through a community scorecard kind of process. And while there's been some great effects to that, we also hear stories of local government officials, when the community criticizes them, they sort of pull the community members aside and say, well, you didn't say the right things, and putting pressure on the community to stay silent. or the community coming to some of the officials who don't give their clan family preferential treatment and say, if something happens to you, we're the ones who are going to support you. And so putting a lot of fear of, all right, what happens to me if I don't continue to have this job? And so these are the kinds of pressures that aren't really taken account of in some of the technical solutions. And what we're finding in the research is that a lot of the kind of traditional anti-corruption approaches, which is most of what we see out there, not just in South Africa, but all over the world, around increasing accountability, around reducing discretion, around oversight, around reducing monopoly, address some of the enablers, the things that allow people to engage in that kind of behavior, but don't really address the drivers, which there's a variety of drivers, but we find that it's necessary to do both, and because those two interact. And if you don't address the drivers, it will be hard to have sustainable behavior change on corruption. And so the technical solutions, what we find is the system kind of adapts. So in Ghana, for example, one of the problems is that people are not paid enough. So they said, all right, let's increase the salaries. And it turns out giving more resources and higher salaries for civil servants actually increased the levels of corruption, surprisingly, in Ghana, whereas in DRC, it didn't. You get overt and stealth resistance. Officials respond to effective procurement reforms. There was a study on procurement reforms where there were a lot of reforms to enhance competitive bidding by making things more transparent, putting more e-procurement, better enforcement and oversight measures. And what happened is that everybody shifted their focus to focus on doing things through legal exceptions or non-competitive procedure types. And sometimes in that case, it's hard to distinguish between sort of use of non-competitive, these legal exceptions, and abuse. Closer to home in our work with Accountability Lab, we've seen that sort of greater oversight. This is looking at fire service and fire safety in Johannesburg and the reasons for the quality of fire safety there. This analysis we've done. Greater oversight may not lead to less corruption or impunity because there are efforts to weaken it. And transparency, while it's an important pressure to affect civil servants, they're also affected by a lot of other pressures. Politicization of appointments and capacity and those types of things. And the transparency may not be enough to overcome some of the other factors affecting their willingness to detect or prevent or correct irregularities. So you need to focus on both of them. So we're looking at corruption as a complex adaptive system, where social norms we found, and somewhat by sort of induction, as we were looking at things, that social norms emerged as a very missing piece to this puzzle. They can be, this is a part of a map of looking at Uganda and police corruption in Uganda. And what we found, there were a lot of oversight and sort of training and kinds of rules about application of the formal rules. And that should have led to sort of a more risk of being caught and punished. But what we also found was a whole set of informal rules where people were likely to be either socially ostracized and isolated, or professionally ostracized, transferred to a less desirable post if they refused to comply with some of the corrupt practices. If your family came in too, you had to hand them over to somebody else so that they could extract the bribes. And if you didn't, you received some punishment. And so that created enormous peer pressure to conform with corruption in the workplace, and normalized it, and really made it very difficult then to institute some of these more technical fixes. And so social norms can be drivers of corrupt behaviors, but also for failure to punish or hold people accountable. And so people will stay silent when when there are efforts to hold people accountable, because they're also subject to pressure. So what do we mean by social norms? We talk about informal rules of behavior. They're the mutual expectations about the right way to behave. And that means sort of, they're the beliefs about what others do. And so we do things because everybody else is doing it. And we believe that that's what they think we ought to do. And that is then backed up by social rewards and punishments. And that's often around reputation and networks and professional advancement. Some examples from Uganda. People are expected to go along, again, soliciting bribes and hand it to somebody else. People are expected to use their position to help their family. In the first example, in Uganda, again, they're expected to do what their boss says, even if it's out of bounds. And they're also expected not to cause trouble for their colleagues, which meant that they basically had pressure not to advance any kind of enforcement procedure. And so what we're finding is that civil servants and public officials, local officials, and at national level are subject to all sorts of pressures that make it very difficult for them to, even if they want to be responsive to citizens, very difficult to do that. And some of them are horizontal, from sort of kinship around supporting family, in group, their own group, around reciprocating favors. It could be from their community and their family. It could be from within their organization, from their peers. And it can be vertical, again, within the institution or within their community, people who are sort of higher of them. It may be their boss, it may be political parties and political institutions. And these create a number of sources of pressure, sometimes direct pressure to engage in corruption, but sometimes indirect pressure to engage in corrupt behaviors. And they're hard to resist. I mean, that's the thing is that they can actually be stronger drivers in attitudes or rules. So even if people change their attitudes and are desiring to do something, or the rules are very clear, these pressures can take priority because people really want to belong to their groups. So seeing that I'm at time, I mean, the idea here is that not so much that social norms are the key to everything, but as an accompaniment, in addition to dealing with some of the kind of traditional kinds of anti-corruption, including citizen action and accountability, working to change some of the perceptions of what people who matter within groups, in the various groups, and within the institution, within communities, typically do, and what they expect to do can really help. And so we've been working with accountability labs and others to think about how do we supplement some of the work that they're doing. And some of the interventions are not really different. The strategies are similar to what you already use: campaigns, dialogue, capacity building, action. It's just nuancing them a bit to really deal with some of these informal rules of the game. I think I'll just end and stop sharing here by just saying that a number of the points that have been made about sort of the need for broad alliances and work at multiple levels, I think is something that we've also found as part of this work. And so this fits nicely with a number of what everybody else is doing, including thinking about creating social norms. We had a project in DRC where we found some of these islands of integrity that I think that Sekwedlani was talking about, and Simon, you've talked about, a number of you, people who are actually doing really good work, and tried to connect them. But they then formed a group to say, well, all right, let's find a group that we can form across some of these lines to be able to hold each other accountable for more and help each other to behave more effectively. And that really did help judges, for example, in this case, really resist some of the political interference that they were experiencing there. So very brief action. I will put my name. We have a lot of resources and on our website. We have a blog, which we hope that everybody would want to come and share some of your great experiences with, but also a lot of resources on social norms for those who are interested.
Thanks, Dana. I'm very excited about the work that you're doing, and I think there's definitely room in South Africa to expand it. Generally, in South Africa, corruption isn't as normalized as the media has it cut out to be. And generally, we are hearing about the terrible stories of corruption. And I think it's interesting to see how that actually affects people's psyche and almost normalizes corruption more than it actually is normalized in practice. And I'd love to see how that kind of plays out in reducing corruption, and if we can tell those positive stories about how people are just pushing on, even in very difficult circumstances. May that actually reduce corruption and enhance accountability. We are actually wanting to start a community of practice between local government officials that are sometimes struggling to connect with other people that are change makers. So those change maker local government officials. And so a question to everyone in the room today, if you want to just send me an email or drop it into the chat in a personal note to me, any government officials that you think we should connect with, who are those change makers and who can be kind of the champions of something like the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, or just doing going above and beyond their call of duty, as Accountability Lab celebrates. The last presentation I have today is from the Compact program, and Kate Tissington is going to present on that. She's the head researcher as part of this program hosted at PARI, but also with SALGA and an international British-based partner, and also a UK-based partner. So they, as I mentioned earlier, are going to be working in 12 pilot towns. Many of them are small towns, and we'd love to see how that can possibly be expanded to other spaces as well. So Kate, yeah, if you want to launch, I know you're also in quite an inception phase in the project, and I don't know if you have questions that can help you guide the process as you refine how the project is being rolled out. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, and thanks for having us here to talk about the program. Yeah, let me just share my screen quickly. I've got just a couple of slides. Okay. I don't know. Oh, what am I trying to do here? Okay. Yeah, so this project is quite a new project. It's started a bit earlier this year, and it is a project that has 3 partners. So the organization I work for, PARI, Public Affairs Research Institute, which is a research and advocacy organization. And then, like you said, the South African Local Government Association, SALGA, which is obviously the sort of the voice of organized local government. And then Integrity Action, which is a UK organization that does a lot of work around citizen-based monitoring tools. This is you see the full name of the project. It's also an EU co-funded project under the same call of the Action for Accountability project that you've already heard about. And it's got a name, Compact, and yeah, we're excited about it. The idea or the goal really of the project is to improve accountability at local government level and to increase the quality of public participation that takes place around the IDP processes in municipalities. These are the municipalities we're working in. We're working in 12 municipalities in 6 provinces. We are in the process now of doing action research. So the idea is really to in a sort of in the spirit of co-production, to work with municipalities and all the partners to come up with tools to assist in improving public participation. And these could be a whole range of things. We're not going in having decided what we're going to come out with. We're going in trying to do a sort of a process of action research. And that's what we're stepping into at the moment, going to all the municipalities, doing interviews with officials, with councillors, and also we will be doing interviews with residents and civil society organizations there. So as you said, and obviously if anyone, I'll put my email in the chat. If anyone knows of any groups, institutions, organizations that are working in these municipalities, we'd love to start to build up a bit of a database of organizations that we can get in touch with and speak to as well. These are just some of the opportunities. I'm struggling, sorry, to see here. Oh, sorry. Some of the opportunities, you'll see, I'm not going to go through all of them. But the idea is really we've identified some of the challenges, and I think people know about what are the challenges around the public participation process, especially in IDP and municipal budgeting. So the goal is really to diagnose a little bit more deeply some of these problems, what's happening, and to think about what are the solutions that we can implement. The project is really focused on coming up with tools and interventions. It's a 3-year project. To come up with tools and interventions that can be used by the municipality. And this could be a whole range of things. We're not sort of focused on coming out with like one particular app, although, you know, an app could be part of the toolbox of tools that we come up with. But we're thinking of a whole range of kind of interventions, including workshops, capacity building, other kinds of tools that we can come up with that can just make the process easier and can start to facilitate better interaction between communities and municipalities. This is just a little bit of a sense of the program. So like Simon said, we are in the inception phase right now, and that's a lot of that's been around sort of partnership development between the different partners. So Parry's sort of focused a little bit more on the research side of things, and Selga on the sort of stakeholder management and relation side of things. But we all actually do a bit of everything and work together very closely. So we kind of, we've managed to get all but one municipality signed on and committed to the project. So we're just waiting to get that confirmation. And like I said, we'll be moving into now sort of second phase, which is the action research phase. What we've come up with, or what we're trying to develop, and again, this is something that's a work in progress, is a public participation index. So coming up with an idea of an index that we can use to benchmark across the municipalities what's happening across various dimensions of public participation. So, you know, in terms of how meaningful it is around access to information, transparency of processes, of timelines, active engagement of communities in meetings, the functioning of institutions like the ward committees, as well as trying to see how to have how residents and communities can have more power in decision-making processes that affect planning as well as performance management in municipalities. So that's just a brief overview. And if anyone has any feedback or input, or knows anything about any of these municipalities, please let us know, and feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. Definitely a lot of room for input there. And yeah, if we use this TAN platform to, over the next 2 or 3 years, continue exploring both these EU co-funded projects and sort of hearing and teasing out the findings that are coming out as they go forward, I think it would both enhance the projects and also lend to a more widespread uptake, perhaps, of, for instance, this toolbox that you put forward. I'm going to hand over to Andrew just to take us through kind of thematic analysis, to use big words, of what we've heard before I round up the session for the day, and then hand over to a musical performance to finish off. Thank you.
Simon, firstly, what incredible diverse projects we've heard here. And it's very encouraging, from monitoring to research to campaigns to practical tools, multiple pilots in a number of towns. So really, firstly, just very grateful that we've been able to pull all this together. And it's really encouraging. We can remain prisoners of hope, drawing inspiration from what people are doing on the ground and doing to support what is on the ground, to address corruption, to build accountability in our country that has been very badly battered over the last 10, 15 years. So a couple of points. Firstly, I think it's to really encourage all the organizations on this call, including those who have presented, but also those who have listened, how do we deepen collaboration and getting access to the information. I know, Simon, you'll prepare a report that goes out with these slides and the linkages to the organization, so we won't lose this information. And ultimately, this network is not just a knowledge sharing network, it's also a support network. So how do we collectively organize support for people fighting tough battles on the ground to build accountability, to change the way in which their municipality runs, which their society runs, and where their town runs? So I think this is part of the process here. If I could just lift out a couple of the points very quickly. I mean, firstly, Diana, thank you for your input. I really appreciate the kind of deeper analysis and also being able to draw on global lessons here in South Africa and kind of what works, and the need to address both the drivers as well as the enablers, and defining something like corruption as a complex adaptive system. And kind of, I see in your presentation sort of references to work I'm familiar with that was driven by a former mayor of Bogota in Colombia, Antanas Marcos, who really tried very hard to not just look at law enforcement of the rules, but also the social norms and the moral values, and using these three weapons really to drive change in his city, and succeeding in the time that he was mayor, using some really creative ways, including street theater, Simon. It also kind of links to a lot of the work by Matt Andrews, the sort of Kennedy School, building state capabilities, navigating the authorizing environment, and the destructive power of social norms in inhibiting and blocking change within that. So thank you for that. And I think we need to follow up and get a lot more of that information from the other countries that you've been working in. I think also on the outer reporting tool, I mean, what an incredible service. So thank you, Norman. And I kind of two things here. One is, firstly, it's free and there's no excuse if municipalities don't make use of this. And I'm kind of thinking, Stephanie, you know, how do we get COGTA and SALGA to encourage every municipality in the country to adopt this technology and use it and begin to share data? And I'm interested over time, Norman, how do we show how this has improved operation and maintenance and responsiveness, and cutting down delays and things, and it obviously needs to be accompanied by building of capacity and capabilities to respond within the municipality. And I guess on its own, it's not going to do that. We're going to have the other programs there as well. And then
so if the municipality doesn't integrate, we will send them the information anyway of what's happening in the municipality.
Okay. Well, let's hope they integrate it. Let's get a top-down process to try and get them to adopt it and integrate it. But I take your point. One can still use it as a tool of accountability because you are looking at the data anyway, whether the municipality has integrated or not. So thank you for that. That's a great first step. And so every community in the country can be using this tool, and the take-up needs to be both on the community side and then hopefully the municipality side. I think just a final point, Simon, from my side on Lungile's, he singled out one thing that caught my attention was this: where does resistance to being held accountable come from? Because that's one of the underlying issues. And I think that clearly, if you're a corrupt person, you know, that's a good reason not to be held accountable, because otherwise you're going to potentially go to jail. But there's people who don't want to be held accountable, who are not necessarily corrupt or stealing money or public goods and things like that. But I think there's two things. One is we do have a system which rewards upwards accountability to political parties, particularly to get on the next list for the elections. So the whole system is designed for upwards accountability to political parties rather than downwards accountability to citizens. And that's something that we need to talk about. And secondly, we've certainly come across persistence of what I would call a command and control culture. It's kind of, do you know who I am? I'm in charge here. You will listen to what I do. And there's still that kind of deference for positions and hierarchies and patriarchal structures in many of our systems. And so I think that is another thing that we need to look at and discuss and tackle. But colleagues, thank you very much for attending from our side. And Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I've really learned a lot. I mean, I am, as EDP, a specialist in partnering and collaboration, and that's what we do as our bread and butter. But certainly small towns and regeneration work in small towns is quite new to us, and also the focus on accountability. What we're looking forward to is working with the likes of business chambers, small business institute, residents associations, working with kind of the ground up accountability brewing and growing organizations, and then joining that with the top down. And we already have such a fantastic working relationship with COG National, but looking at SALGA, we're building links with SALGA Provincial in the Western Cape and at national level, and also at COGTA and provincial levels. So I think what the important aspect is that we aren't trying to solve it ourselves as EDP or as the other 7 support partners, all of us NGOs, but rather to use this platform as a connection point so that we can solve it together. And going forward, we'll see, I think we'll probably have smaller group sessions combined with these larger group sessions. So please get in touch if you have ideas of how you would like this kind of session to change. If there are any feedback points that you feel we could be better, let us know. It's only the 3rd session that we've had like this, and we're very open to suggestions of how we can make it even more effective for you. We also are going to be producing an opinion piece from this session, just because of the level of detail and the amount of information out there that's been shared just today. We'll be producing an opinion piece with some of our team members here at EDP. So over and above the workshop report, which we will distribute with the presentations, we'll also share an opinion piece. If you'd like to be involved with co-writing that opinion piece, let me know, and we can see how we can do that without taxing anybody or burdening anyone too much. But if you have things that you'd like to share, do get in touch with me. Lastly, I think in the name of Connections Carnival, and also in that original aim of this process of not being a space where we just have complaints, we recognize the challenges, but there's so much fantastic stuff happening in small towns. We've already heard about all the actions today that are promoting accountability. There also are really exciting initiatives that we've pulled together as part of this Connections Carnival, which is happening across 6 or actually 12 towns across South Africa. And one of them is led by Sibosile Xaba from the Space. So maybe I'll just want to invite Sibosile to come on. If you are still with us, you want to just share your video and come on, and I'll post a link to his music, both available on Spotify and elsewhere. I see that he's already got over 500 plays on Spotify, 500,000 plays, sorry, on Spotify for just one of his tracks. Sibosile, are you able to hear last? You great. In answer, you respond in music. Thank you. So without further ado, I'll just hand over to you and take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon, and hello to everyone. I'm happy to play for you guys. I hope you enjoy. I'm sitting on top of a beautiful mountain here. So my camera is not the best, so I'm going to face it towards the mountain, and I hope you can hear the audio. The song that I'm going to play is called Umdali, which is a song that basically gives thanks to the creator, for we are nothing without the creator. Nothing can be done without the creator. So it's just a song to say thank you to the creator. And keep up the good work, everyone. We are really grateful. Oh, Tala, konke, oh, Tala, konke, oh, Tala, konke. Akazahlule lutho mama asoze ngahlulwe lutho umdali ngahlulwe lutho wadala izihlahla namacembe nezimpande wadala abantu nezilwane azahlulwe lutho asoze ahlulwe lutho umdali 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 akaze asoze akaze asoze akaze asoze ahlule 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 lutho mama mama mama. All right, that's it from me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that outro. I don't know. We're somehow going to have to make this a tradition.
You're most
No
welcome.
session will be complete without an outro from Sibusile. Thank you, everyone. If you want to come on back, just put your videos back. I know many of us have already left, but if you want to put your videos back on, those participants that are still here, it's always nice to just say goodbye face to face, as it were. Lovely. And in Connections Carnival tradition, if you want to put on your video and put on your mics, sorry, and inspired by Sibosile's sound making and music making, you can take whatever object that you may have that may make sound and may make music in a broad sense of the word, and you can just outro ourselves, put on those mics, I'm seeing a lot of mics still off. Put on the mics. There we go. Put on your mics. And 3, 2, 1. Goodbye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Simon.